Hello, I'm Ed with Quality Sewing and Vacuum, and I work in our Tukwila location. Today I hope to familiarize you a bit with your computerized sewing machine, and I have brought in one of my favorites, the Bernette B77. With this machine I hope to show you some of its basic functions, show you a little bit about the special items that come within the box in the machine, maybe a little bit of cleaning, a little maintenance, and a little bit of troubleshooting, so hopefully you come up with the best stitch possible. So, the best way to interface with this video is to set your machine up in front of you, put your device next to it. That way you can play the video, pause it periodically, take notes as you need. More importantly, see how it applies to your machine and do these things over and over. So pause, repeat, and all of a sudden, finally these things might be cemented into your sewing experience. So, with that in mind, let's get started. With this Bernette, you've pulled it out of the box, you've set it up. Now what? We have our power cord, a simple circle and square to plug in here. We have our foot control, an 1/8 inch jack here, and our on-off button, which is conveniently labeled on-off because I can never remember if the straight is on or off. So, as our machine comes to life, let's peer inside our little box of wonder. With the machine, we have, obviously, your spool pin, and in our box we have an additional spool pin which can be placed on your bobbin winder, and that way, because the machine does have the option of using 2 needles, and so you would have 1 thread spool on here, 1 thread spool on here, feed them through. I'll show you later how to feed them through the machine. Let's see, we have 4 spools, 1 in the machine, 3 in the box. This is our seam guide for when you want to do quilting. That way you can set this up within your needle process and have greatly spaced, or very evenly spaced seams in your sewing. We have our spool caps, and it's best to put your spool cap up over in spools basically a little bit larger than your spool as you have, although we do have one option in here of the small spool cap, and not that I've seen a spool thread this small, but it's there for you. We also have the all-important oil tool, and there are several points of necessary oiling on this machine. There's about 3 within this area here. There's a convenient screw on the side of the machine, 3 points of oiling, and about 2 within the bobbin area to keep things running smoothly. So you want to keep that handy. We have our screwdriver for removing our needle plate. With this particular machine, there are 2 needle plates. We have our 7mm needle plate for doing all of your zigzag stitches, your decorative stitches, and then there's also a single needle plate for when you want to do free motion quilting or simple straight stitches. And your machine senses both of those, so you can make sure you have the right needle plate for the right foot. Here is our brush tool, important for cleaning out our bobbin area if you're working with particularly linty fabrics, polar fleece, minky, that sort of thing. After a few hours you want to get in there and clean that material out of there so it doesn't get messed up into your needle area. And one of my favorite tools, the seam ripper. We also have in here our spool net. This is for when you're working with novelty threads, metallics, that sort of thing that wants to unwind from your spool fairly readily, and you want to sort of have a control over that. So you'll slip that over your spool of thread on your spool pin. In addition to these tools, let's look at our feet. The feet on this particular machine snap on and off quite readily. That snaps in. Push on the toe of the foot, as it were, and it snaps right back. So the foot that's going to come with the machine is applicable to most of your stitches, decorative stitches, straight stitches, zigzag, that sort of thing. So that we'll see a lot of use. We do have a separate decorative stitch for using for your satin stitches and that sort of thing. There's a small channel in here that allows you to feed your seams that you're making through smoothly. We have our overcast stitch, which on knit stitches or knit wear actually will emulate a serger effort, but you'll need to, it has a little groove right here for you to set the edge of your fabric right up against so you can get a nice even seam on that. And we finally have our blind hem stitch for creating invisible hemming on your pant legs and that sort of thing. We have this sweet little buttonhole foot, or actually a button application foot with a rubber application. You'll put that down or snap this into place like so, and then when you lower it with your machine, it'll keep your button right where you need it to be. Finally, we have our zipper foot, which you'll use in conjunction with our needle to the right, needle to the left. Controls over here, 7 steps to the left, 7 steps to the right, and of course center for creating a perfectly installed zipper. So, with that all aside, let's start with our machine. Over here, of course, is our flywheel. You can use that for nuancing your stitches and your sewing by hand, although the machine allows you to take care of a lot of that with our speed control, which we will get to. Moving from right to left, we have our stitch width, which you can see manifested here on our screen. We have our stitch length, which again, you see a real-life manifestation on your screen. We have our needle up and down. We have our secure button. We have, as I said, our start or our speed control button. This particular machine goes up to 1,000 stitches per minute. I myself find I need a little more control and slide it down from there. We have our onboard on-off switch here, which we can use in lieu of our presser foot or our foot control. We have our presser foot up and down. The great thing about this machine is you have control over that, but as you press and go on your stitch effort here, the presser foot will automatically come down. We have our thread cutting button here, and we finally have our reverse stitch here. So, when your machine arrives, you have an empty bobbin in its necessary spot. So we're going to take that out, place this, actually before we place it on our bobbin top wind up, we're going to place our spool of thread onto the spool pin and place our spool cap on there. So the great thing about this machine is up above we have a series of arrows. The dotted arrows will show me where to take my bobbins to, and our solid arrows will tell me where to thread my machine in. So we're going to load our bobbin first, bring this across. Both efforts start in the same hook right here. And then what you need to do is provide some tension in between, or some resistance between your spool of thread and your bobbin so that you can wind a nice tight bobbin. So we're going to wrap around our tension and make sure that is, you might want to grab over on this side, that's tucked into place so that there is resistance. Then I'm going to bring this end over. We're going to pop this through this hole in the top of my bobbin. Pop this on our spool. Now the beautiful thing about our 5-inch display screen on this Bernette is once this is in place, you know you're doing the right action. So in order to get things started, I'm going to hold the tail of my thread in this finger and then just start my button here. You might want to start down with your threads, your winding speed a little lower, because that allows you to wind a nice compact bobbin and keeps you a little bit more in control of the situation overall. So I start along here. I'll stop, because if your luck is anything like mine, this little bit of rogue thread always finds a way to get into trouble in the rest of my stitching. I'll continue my winding. The machine, of course, will allow you not to overwind your bobbin, and it'll stop when necessary, so not to worry about that. We'll go ahead and clip our thread there, unwind it from our first tension disc towards the bobbin, and now I'm going to follow along on my solid arrows. So I'm going to, again, come through our first hook, come around the top, and then, as with most sewing machines, a simple down, up, down motion. So down, following the arrow here, which takes it through our tension disc. What's nice with the Bernette is that your presser foot wants to be up, and it's going to have it be up until you tell it to do otherwise. So your tension discs, when within this, are going to stay open, and thus your thread's going to be properly placed. If you happen to be using two threads, one spool here, one spool here, and your double needle, what you will do is make sure that you have one thread on the left side of your tension disc, one thread on the right side of your tension disc. That way they stay separate coming down. They will still thread through this area here and come up onto your take-up lever here, which I'll show you in a moment. But then on down here, you come through a hook, and then there's a little tiny hook on either side of the needle to make sure, again, your threads stay separate. But let's continue with the simple down, up, through your take-up lever back down through this hook. We're going to use the left side of this. We're going to use this left side hook, get our thread snagged around there. Since it wants to be way, there we are. Now, another thing, now at this point in time, in order to free up space around my needle, I would want to put down my presser foot, but Bernette has taken care of that for me. So when I put down my automatic needle threader, my presser foot drops down for me. So I come around here, you'll see this little plastic hook on this side. I bring my thread on that side, make sure I'm connected on this side, and then gently holding my thread here and my threader on my left-hand side, release both, and I'm threaded. We're going to bring our presser foot back up, release our bobbin, and now dropping this into place. It wants to come off the left-hand side counterclockwise. And what you want to focus on in here is that there's a little hook for your bobbin case. Don't try to put your thread in there. There's a little bit of plastic and an arrow, conveniently. Right here, let's get that underneath that. Hook it around and follow our arrows here. And finally our cutter. Let's put our bobbin cover back in place. And we're ready to go. This machine comes with a handy stylus, although don't panic if you happen to lose your stylus, as I often do. You can still operate everything with your finger. On my home control, I go through my utility stitches. So I have my straight stitch, zigzag, blind hem, triple stitch, a reinforced stitch. Basically what it does is it back tacks anywhere from 2 to 6 stitches, proceeds with your stitch line, and then once you touch your secure button, it'll back tack those same 2 to 6 stitches, all of which you can control on your screen. Continuing through, if I want to look at all my stitches through at the same time, this allows me a larger screen area to proceed through all of those. I have darning stitches, which that's one foot I forgot to show you. We have our free motion foot. And the free motion foot allows just for that free motion quilting, but we'll want to drop our feed dogs at that same time. So we remove our handy tray, slide that off to one side, and our feed dog control is right here. Feed dogs down with teeth pointed down, feed dogs up, teeth pointed up. Very convenient. So I would also use this with my feed dogs down for darning, repairing patches, that sort of thing. A very handy foot to have. We're going to slide this back in place, and I'm going to proceed now through the rest of my stitch options. We have our satin stitches, quilting, or satin stitches, decorative stitches. If you want to make a row of boats, you can do that, porpoises, etc. You can use this little plus tool right here to be able to combine these stitches if I want a lotus and then a duck and then a boat and then say this other lotus looking flower here. I can add those together, touch the heart, save them in one of my folders, and then retrieve that at a later date. Proceeding back to my decorative stitches, that gives you a lot to explore there. Each one of these folders holds quite a few stitches, and you can proceed and explore as you can. This particular machine has 3 alphabets, all of which you can combine in the same little plus mechanism lettering. And then when it comes to at the end of any one of these design features, you can touch your secure button and it will finish your design for you, backstitch it, tack it in place, and it will finish it for you. Continuing on, we have our quilting stitches down here. Again, we can expand that and go through quite a number of options in our quilting stitches. And then finally, a wonderful little feature I like for Bernette is this little tool here, which is if you have fabric, a garment item, down to even faux leather, or yes, faux fur. There is actually a touch for faux fur, and I want to put a zipper in. What it's going to do is recommend what foot I want to be using. It recommends what needle I should use. It recommends what thread I should use. Basically everything you're going to need to do to come up with the best possible stitch in this area. So I can go through this, I can use it with lightweight, medium, heavyweight fabric, even jeans. There's a little stitch pocket here. And again, lightweight, midweight, heavyweight knits. All of that to be able to go through. If I want to do an applique on a knit, it's going to give me all the information that I need. Confirm that you've seen it, and we move on. We also have 14 buttonholes in this particular machine. That is where your handy buttonhole foot comes in. We're going to pop this off quite readily. We want to drop pop our buttonhole foot into place, and we're able to proceed. So what happens at this point in time is that you need to drop this particular lever, conveniently marked with a buttonhole, down to fit between these two plastic elements on your buttonhole foot. That allows the machine to determine just how long your button is supposed to be, and you will find that once you touch or put your button into this place, it will measure your button to the correct thickness and length exactly. What I will recommend when you're doing buttonholes is always sample, 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 even if you're going to be doing multiples. And what another lovely feature about this machine is, if I was to go in here in my buttons and I select, say, my basic buttonhole here, I have the option of going in under information, and if the buttonhole, for example, is not meshing up quite right at the end, I can use these same stitch length and width numbers to be able to nuance my button and re-stitch a sample until I get it exactly the way I want it. And I can then save that back into my folders. So 14 buttonholes, eyelets, let me see, 3 eyelets that will keep you busy for quite some time. Going back through this dial, or this area here, we have this wonderful little echo feature which puts everything to sleep, because the great thing is if you've created a stitch but you haven't yet saved it to your folder, if you happen to shut off your machine, you're done for the night, you've lost that. That's a bit of a problem. So much like your computer, you're able to drop it into echo mode, touch this later, and everything is exactly the way exactly the way it was when you left it. So beyond that, like I said, the great one other feature that I forgot to mention is this needle up, needle down process. Right in the corner here, a lot of machines will offer that when you are stitching a seam or stitching a line, and you would want to be able to pivot in points, you can set it so that your needle ends up always down in your fabric. And we have another wonderful little tool that I forgot to tell you about, is our knee lift. So if I'm working along, let's put our foot in place, move our buttonhole foot up out of the way if I happen to be moving along and I'm sewing, and I need to pivot, I use my knee lift, and it's going to raise so I can actually continue on and focus both hands on the effort of the machine itself. We have our settings where you can literally control just about everything you want. If you want your machine to be able to tell you that you have run out of thread or are close to, you can set that. Tell it that if you want, I love this little eye open, eye close, so that you can see it or you cannot. We go back here, and actually it gives you more settings for your machine. You can set the level of your lighting, this wonderful LED lighting that we have with Bernette with the wonderful 9 inches of throat space, so I can control all that. What's nice too is also with my stitch width and length, I can set all these controls. And one wonderful thing that if you can't remember, if you're at the default point in this, any change to the default settings on your screen is going to be outlined in yellow. If I wanted to go back to default, I simply touch that and it resorts back to where it was. If you by any chance have made all kinds of changes to things and you say, I really would like to get back to where it was when I brought it straight out of the box, there's this wonderful little factory illustration you can touch, and it'll set it right back to everything where it was originally. So, several things what I would recommend as you experience your machine. I would go through and basically examine every stitch that you have in here. It sounds onerous, but that way you have a documentation of what all your machine does. You'll be able to refer to it on a regular basis. You'll know the size and dimensions they are, even though a lot of this within you can nuance through your stitch width and your stitch length controls here. Experiment with your free motion foot. Put each foot on separately, even if you think that you're only going to use part of the machine or part of the machine's capabilities. Explore it all. That way you familiarize yourself with it, and you might recall when you have a special use for it. Again, we have some stretch stitch in our utilities. If I wanted to be able to use this, so I can explore Anything with a dotted line is going to be for my knits, so I would be best to do some samples for that. Work with your thread tension all along here. If I touch this area here, this allows me to adjust my thread tension on finer or thicker fabrics. This allows me to choose, my machine will let me choose either the 7mm stitch plate or the single needle stitch plate. It will, again, once you have that in place, the machine will let you know. And if you select the needle up here, if you're using a twin needle, it's not going to let you put this stitch plate on. So for someone like me who says, no, I want to do this, my machine fortunately is me-proof and won't let me do that. So I come down here, I choose my foot. If there's a particular stitch I've chosen, it will have a green check next to the one that it recommends highly. There will be a yellow star next to the ones that are still workable, but none of the options will be available for the incorrect feet. Here is your thread or your press or foot tension. If you happen to be hemming, say, a pair of jeans, you're going over the side seam where you have upwards of 9 layers of denim. You can operate or maneuver your thread tension, although there is you can let your pressure foot gauge that tension for you. And finally, the stitch plate and what needles will work with those. The one fantastic feature that I did forget to tell you about with this particular machine is our integrated walking foot. With some of your feet, you'll see a little groove in the back that allows you to snap into place this wonderful little walking foot. Pretty much any sewing machine will come with a walking foot feature. So many of them are another foot separately. Can be a little large and bulky, but with this particular machine, we just snap that right into place, and we can feed through thicker, either if you have slippery fabrics, if we have, say, 2 layers of quilting that you finish with batting in between. What's nice is that this little snap-in walking foot acts as an upper feed dog, so everything feeds through in a very even motion. I think that's all. There's everything that I love about this machine. Almost nothing I don't, except that I can't make it sew by itself. So I highly recommend you explore everything that your machine has to offer. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it's been helpful. And I hope that if you happen to have any more questions, please don't hesitate to come and check us out in the Puget Sound area at any one of our Quality Sewing and Vacuum locations. If you may not be in the Puget Sound area, feel free to check us out online at qualitysewing.com. Also, on our website, you'll find the numbers and locations of our stores. Feel free to call anyone there. We'd be happy to help you with your questions. Online as well, we have a page, I believe listed below, that shows what our favorite notions are amongst our salespeople for the time now. Mine still tends to be the seam ripper, although I'm developing new ones all the time. As well, we'd love to see, as you're coming and experiencing your machine, show us what you're doing. Show us what you're experiencing. Show us how it's turning out. So go on Facebook, post your pictures, or on Instagram, tag us at #QualitySewing. Thanks for joining me today. Happy sewing.